We recently built this patio area in our backyard with a fire pit. So now we need a way to store firewood and not have it get wet during a rainstorm. I made a separate video on this, but my first step was to harvest some pallet wood and also harvest the nails and screws. I spent a good afternoon in the driveway pulling nails and screws, watching football. Next, I built some square frames for the front and the back of the firewood holder. The basic design here is a big square opening, and within that square opening I'm going to add some X's. That's the one design feature I wanted to have in this. And building the front and the back is pretty straightforward. It's about 5 feet wide, maybe 6 feet tall, maybe it's 5.5 feet tall. I forget the dimensions, but I used some corner clamps to hold it while I applied some external wood glue and used 3-inch exterior screws on the front and back. Next step were those X's on the front and back. These serve a couple of purposes. One is I just like the look of it to break up the large square area. And the second is to allow the wood to be stacked in 4 different stacks. And if you want to pull a log from halfway down the storage rack, you still can. These were made from some pallet wood that was oak, so these are extremely strong. I cut them at an angle on the chop saw so that they would fit right in the diagonal of the square frame. And then I measured so that the 2 boards could be notched so they would interlock with each other. In other words, I cut away half the board on one of the cross braces and then cut away the other half of the board on the other cross brace. I tried a couple of methods for this, just ended up with a jigsaw. Got a pretty good joint from it in the end. Here's a shot of fitting in those cross members in the driveway. Like I said, it was a pretty tight fit. I actually had to tap it in with a hammer, and then I stood the whole thing up so I could brace it with screws from the side. Those cross braces are held in with 3-inch screws from the sides. And of course I did this twice. If you'll notice, I left 1.5 inches on the upper legs of the frame, and I left about 5 inches on the lower part of the frame. This is actually upside down. The upper part is meant so that I could have a sloped roof at the top that you'll see later. Next I moved on to the sides. Those 2 square frames are held together by pine boards from the pallets. So I got my chop saw in the driveway, set up a stop, and cut these about 16.5 inches in length. In the end, I had to cut something like 20 boards. I forget the number. Next step was to prepare the area. We had this old doghouse that I built with my younger son long ago in this unused corner of the yard. The dog never used it, but it was fun building the doghouse. So I pulled the doghouse out, pulled out all the weeds, and got ready to build the holder. What I'm doing here is getting ready to connect the 2 frame pieces with those pine boards that I cut. So at the top I'm clamping one of the pine boards to temporarily connect those 2 frames. The whole firewood holder is 16 inches deep. That allows us to hold wood, which the standard measurement is around 16 inches. But the width of those X's in the middle of the frame allow me to hold 12-inch logs if I need to. I connected the pine pieces with some roofing nails. I had planned to reuse the nails that I pulled out of the pallet, but they were a bit too long. This is the point where I realized a big mistake. I had flipped over one of the frames, so the longer legs, which are supposed to be the top of the frame, were at the bottom. So I had to undo everything I did, pull all of those boards out, flip over the frame, and start over. Fun times. This just happened because I was working too quickly, trying to beat the sunset. So the next day I came out with some fresh energy and finished off attaching those boards. Next step was to attach some supports for a sloped roof. You can see there I'm measuring down about 2 or 3 inches on the back of the firewood holder and marking a straight line across that, which I cut with a jigsaw. This is to set the slope of the roof. I wanted the roof to slope back so that when we have rain or we have snow, I'll have some corrugated tin on the top, and that can help the water to sweep away and stay away from the wood. I attached these 2x4s, again pallet wood, with the nails that I pulled out of the pallets to the top. And I had to custom cut the final side panel to fit that angle. For the roof itself, it's pretty similar to the sides. It's those same pine boards cut to the depth of the firewood holder, which is about 16 inches, plus a couple of inches on either side. I wanted to have a small overhang so the rain doesn't get to the wood. So I cut several of these boards at about 20 inches total, and then started nailing them in the top. And just like on the sides, I had to custom cut the last one to be the right width to fit in on the top. Just doing that with a jigsaw. Here was some satisfaction. I had 2 nails left, the exact number that I needed. So I went through an entire box of roofing nails, and the number was exactly right to the nail. Satisfaction. Moving on to the roof covering, I got a sheet of corrugated steel from Home Depot. It was about 20 bucks. And this was 8 feet by about 2 feet. It allowed me to cut 4 sections and overlap them. I ended up cutting this with my circular saw. I did a lot of searching on YouTube, and it seemed like the approved way to do it, or at least one good way to do it, is to reverse the blade in your circular saw and just cut the metal directly with that wood blade. It worked great. It's loud, but it cuts like butter. You cut through it within 15-20 seconds. So I did this 4 times to cut off 4 sections that are about 20 or 21 inches in width. The only downside of this cutting method with the circular saw blade backwards was it left a lot of metal shrapnel laying around, and I like to walk around here barefoot sometimes, so I was careful to sweep it out. Next, I got the panels in place, figured out how I wanted them to overlap, clamped them down, and then started to attach them to the structure. I'm putting screws about 4 inches from the edge. That'll allow the screws to go straight into that 2x4 that's under the roof. Once I'd marked where I wanted all of the screws to be, I popped a hole with the drill. And then I came in with some clear caulk and put it in those holes. My theory here was when the screws go in the holes, that caulk will seal the hole a little bit and let just a little bit less rain seep in to the holder. Seemed to work pretty well. Those screws seated themselves into the caulk well. I'm not worried about a little bit of rain getting in there, but just don't want it to drip onto the wood. As you can see, when I did this, I found a couple of additional places I wanted holes, so went back and drilled holes there. All in all, it went pretty quickly. back to the area, I did some reading, and the firewood for this holder is going to be about 1,000 pounds, so I wanted to have a good foundation. So I dug it out, tamped down the dirt, and put some paving stones there. Made sure they're nice and level so that the firewood holder would have 6 contact points onto some solid material. I didn't want this thing sinking into the dirt and falling over. Then I called in the big help to get the holder in place. And I put a little bit of support under the middle of the boards to hold up that big weight. Here's some footage of the final product before I put any wood in it. And the final step was just to fill it with firewood. This was a 200-piece batch that I bought from a local guy. And my math worked out pretty well. It held the whole batch. All in all, a great project. Had a lot of fun building it. Hope it helps someone else.